Combat Patrol is basically Warhammer 40K on training wheels, so it is great for beginners. But like the cool training wheels, the kind of ones that you had on your bike until you were 12 years old because you didn't trust the physics. Was that just me? Maybe that was just me. Anyway, instead of needing a dining table the size of one of those huge tables that Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones would feast at, and then you needed 200 miniatures, you just kind of just grab a Combat Patrol box and you've got a ready-to-go little army. The idea is you and your mate bring roughly balanced squads so that you can actually finish a game before you have real-world stuff to do, like laundry and all the other boring stuff, or before your back gives out from leaning over the table. Each box is themed, so Space Marines if you want to be the Emperor's Golden Boys, or Orcs if you fancy green labs who love a scrap. Then you've got Xenos, for example, if you're into weird aliens, or Chaos if you've decided that selling your soul to a dark god is cheaper than therapy. It covers pretty much all of the big factions without needing to sell a kidney and afford the models at the same time. The best part is, I'm not funny, the best part is it's quick, it's fun, and it actually lets you play instead of spending 6 hours flipping through codexes like you're revising for grimdark A levels. If, like me, you're riddled with ADHD, you don't have a lot of patience and you still want to play, but you also want to do other stuff too, like life, it's the perfect starting point. It's small, it's easy to get into, just enough to hook you in before you end up accidentally painting an entire army at 3 a.m. while questioning your life choices. It is perfect if you are just dipping your toes into Warhammer, and let's be honest, this hobby, it isn't cheap. And painting an army, it takes longer than painting like that spare room that your partner's been nagging you to paint since before you moved in. So before you go ahead and drop a small fortune and half of your free weekends on building a full army, Combat Patrol it's gonna let you test drive a faction. It's quick, it's cheaper than going all in, and it does give you a feel for how the army plays before you marry it for the long haul. Because these guys, they're going to be with you for life, and if you don't paint them, they will just stare at you and fill you with shame every time you make eye contact, because basically Combat Patrol, if you're going down the pub, is your first pint. It's enough to see if you're going to enjoy the night without waking up with a Titan-sized hangover. It is important to note that not all Combat Patrol boxes are built the same. Some of them, they're going to give you proper value for money, and that is what this video is going to be about. Kind of like you're walking out of Games Workshop with a cheeky 2-for-1 deal, and that is really weird to say out loud. But others, let's just say you're probably going to save more cash building your army the old-fashioned way, one kit at a time, while muttering about how everything was cheaper back in 2nd edition. Yes, I see you in my comments. I see you, I hear you. And that's where this video is hopefully going to come in and help you somewhat, or just give you sort of like an avenue to complain. Either way, my job here is done. I've tried to kind of research the top 10. Okay, in theory 9, one is a bit of a wild card, but 10 Combat Patrol boxes out there currently, semi-currently, that give you the best value for money. Now, I have then gone through every individual multi-part within each Combat Patrol box that I mentioned within this video, and then worked out their total value if you were to buy them individually, and then presented it to you clearly, so that, well, hopefully as clearly as possible with my terrible tech skills, but either way, so that you can screenshot the information for reference if you want to. Please do it, because it's taken me so long. So whether you are trying to squeeze every penny out of your hobby budget like me, or you just want to know how your chosen faction kind of stacks up against the rest, hopefully I have done the maths right so that you can focus on the important stuff, like pretending you're only buying this one more box before sneaking it past your other half. If I have completely flopped this, which I really hope I haven't, because it's taken so long, please be nice. Just drop helpful advice. It is always welcome, but only if it's kind. People do use my comment section in these videos, and they do screenshot the advice that you leave. So the more detailed, the better, but just please make it be nice, be kind. So almost every single Warhammer 40K faction has a Combat Patrol box these days. Now, I haven't gone through every single one because I physically don't have the time, but I did spend my Sunday researching and then collating information to present to you with a top 10 And I say 10, but you'll see why in a minute. Officially, Games Workshop, they sell them on their website, on the Warhammer website, for £100. Now, there are other sites where you can obviously get discounted rates. So, for example, Element Games is one. And to show you what I mean, they are currently selling the new Raven Guard Combat Patrol for £80. Now, I'm going to show you that on the screen just so you can see. There is obviously also people out there, like a sea of people out there with affiliate links, which I'm sure they will be happy to shove in your direction. I am not one of them. Any links you see in my bio, they don't benefit me at all. I'm just trying to help. Please don't come to me for affiliate links. They are the bane of my existence, but that is a rant I will save for another day. Okay, we're in this together. Through my Sunday of research, I'm going to confidently say that Games Workshop, they pack around £50 of extra value into most of these boxes. So you're usually getting more plastic for your money than, for example, if you were to go and buy the kits separately. And that's what I've done. I've kind of broken it down into, this is the kit, this is what it would look like separately. That said, not all boxes are created equal. Some of them, as you will see soon, are absolutely brilliant deals, and I will share those with you. They feel like you have kind of beaten the system in some respects, while others are a bit like paying full price for a starter set, then realizing that half the sprues are just like something random, like shoulder pads. I will not be including those in this video. I'm just doing value for money. So to save you the headache and the calculator, do people still use calculators? I definitely did. My maths was not that great. This is the full lineup of my, in theory, 9, 10 altogether combat patrol boxes ranked in value for money. I'm trying to defend myself before it's even started. And I'm going to start with the best value for money because I hate having to wait until the end of the video before someone tells you the best option. Did I mention that I have no patience? I think I did. If I didn't, there we go. Anyway, okay, for your records, all of my videos have timestamps in them in the description. So please feel free to skip to the ones that interest you the most. Don't ignore them and then comment and say, she didn't get to the point until 12 minutes. Look at the timestamps. Anyway, up first at number 1, not 10, because I'm not annoying. Well, I am annoying, but I'm not annoying when it comes to top 10s. Chaos Daemons. Right, wait, because I know what you're about to say. Chaos Daemons are unlikely to receive a 40k specific refresh when we get 11th edition next year. Now, you currently cannot buy their combat patrol directly from Warhammer, as it has been discontinued. I said I wasn't annoying, didn't I? I'm so sorry. Now, this might feel like a total waste of time putting them in here, and particularly putting them in at number 1. And I do get that, I understand. But in terms of value for money, this box, it does trump others. You have like £180 worth of miniatures within this box. My personal army, my Blood Angels army, I got them complete from eBay. I sourced them secondhand. Now, so I'm including this in here because if you were eyeing these guys up, and if, like me, you are on a very tight budget when it comes to Warhammer and you are scouring eBay, feeling disheartened that you can't buy these guys brand new, if you managed to score one secondhand like me, the money you would save would be crazy, because obviously brand new, it was £100, valued at £180. So I feel like it's kind of important to mention them if you do manage to acquire some. If I explain briefly what is going on, if you're new and you don't quite understand, the Chaos Daemons, they are apparently leaving. Apparently, it is all speculation that the Chaos Space Marine Codexes within Warhammer 40k. You can, if you play them, still run your demon armies using the Grotmus detachments. And the Chaos Daemons, they still have their data cards hanging out in the Chaos Daemon Index, at least for now. For now is like a classic Games Workshop move. It's like when your favorite TV show, it kind of gets renewed for a limited series, and you're safe today, but tomorrow, who bloody knows. That said, it does feel like Games Workshop, it feels like it's pulling back a bit. It could be a good thing in the long run, or it could turn out to be one of those, like, it seemed fine at first, but the internet has lost their mind situations once the dust settles. What really gets me, and I am curious to know, I guess, what you guys think as well, is kind of where the Chaos Daemons are heading in general. They have always been that kind of army that you could double dip with. You can play them in both Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar. So I've included them purely for value for money. Now, obviously, if you don't agree with this, and I know there's going to be a bunch of you that don't, if you don't agree with my decision, just skip ahead to the ones that you can now officially get. Please don't get annoyed, because I am going to chat about their lore for a couple of minutes, just for anybody that is interested and might want to try and acquire one. So in terms of their lore, they are basically basically living chunks, I guess, of nightmare fuel made from pure psychic energy from the warp. What's the warp, right? Think of it as the universe's like dodgy back alley. Now, on one hand, it's kind of how ships will travel faster than light, like a cosmic shortcut. On the other hand, it's also an ocean of raw psychic energy, where all the worst emotions of every living thing is just going to bubble away. You've got fear, rage, lust, ambition, and from that kind of stew, I suppose, the Chaos Gods and their demons are born. So yeah, it's both spaces like motorway and its haunted house at the same time. Now back to demons. they're basically the dodgy offspring of the Chaos Gods. They're whipped up whenever one of the big four kind of fancies making a new minion. They're self-aware, they've got personalities, and 9 times out of 10 they are like malevolent grits who want to ruin your day. Sorry. Each demon is like a little slice of a Chaos God's personality. Khorne's lads, for example, they're all about rage and skulls. Nurgle's lot they're gross. They're gross, weirdly cheerful, like plague bags. Slanesh's crew are like your strange clubbing friends who never grow out of it. And Tzeentch's demons, well, they're basically like that mate who's always got a new master plan after a couple of pints. The catch, though, is that the demons, they're not truly separate from their gods. They can get yeeted back into the warp whenever their boss feels like it. Imagine being at the pub and then your missus just kind of snaps her fingers and suddenly you're home in your slippers. That's life as a demon. They're not as powerful as the gods themselves, but they're the ones that you'll actually see doing the dirty work, swarming across battlefields, popping into the real space to cause chaos, or haunting poor sods who thought summoning them was a clever idea. Okay, up next at number 2, Genestealer Cults. Again, super great value for money. Now, anything from this part forwards within the video can be officially like acquired. So Genestealer Cults, £160 or over £160 worth of miniatures. They are basically the galaxy's dodgiest fan clubs, the secret societies, I guess, that you could say, that worship Tyranids. Tyranids, you know, the big space locusts that eat entire planets for breakfast. Now, these cults, they spread like mold in dark corners of the Imperial cities. And just like mold, they're a nightmare to get rid of. The whole point of a cult, I guess, is to quietly worm its way into an Imperial world, take over from the inside, and then throw a massive uprising in the name of their so-called Xenos god. The catch, that god isn't divine at all. It's just a Tyranid hive fleet sniffing out their dinner. So once the cult pulls off its big revolution, the Tyranids, they show up and they eat everyone. Including the cultists who thought that they were the chosen ones. It's a bit of a rough deal, really, I guess you could argue. The cultists themselves, now, they come in various flavours, I guess, ranging from scary but still passably human to full-blown alien nightmare. Some can sneak around in society looking like your average, like pasty, bold Imperial worker with some dodgy tattoos. Others are so mutated. They've got extra limbs, claws, creepy bug faces. Those ones tend to stay in the tunnels, under hoods and rags until it's uprising time. Then later generations of Genestealer cults are the really, really sneaky ones, the wolves in sheep's clothing, so to speak. They look just human enough, I suppose, to blend in, working away in the grimy factories and mines of the Imperium. Nobody gives them a second glance, but underneath those work clothes, every one of them is marked by the alien. So when the cult's numbers, they swell and everything is in place, that's when the big show is about to begin. The uprising. Overnight, thousands of them pour out of tunnels and basements and spires like bugs boiling out of a nest. And by the time the Imperium even realizes what's happening, the cult's already 10 steps ahead. Saboteurs have already sort of like cut the supply lines, hidden assassins have taken out commanders, and demolition crews have blocked every escape route. Anyone clever enough to try and run just finds burning wreckage, or worse, a pack of hybrids just waiting to jump them in the rubble. The whole rebellion is perfectly orchestrated chaos, stacked completely in the cult's favour. Now, by the time the Genestealer cult finally kicks off its like uprising, the enemy's already in a right state. Ammo dumps are mysteriously empty, fuel tanks are bone dry, troop transports have gone missing, and the support fleet in orbit looks like it's about to be used for target practice. When the cult swarms out, the poor sods that they're facing them are already like stranded, surrounded, and halfway beaten. Basically, it's less a battle and more like a carefully scheduled massacre. Right? Now, on paper, most cultists aren't much better armed than like your average planetary militia with a chip on their shoulder, but what they do have is ridiculous numbers and fanatical devotion. Add in ambushes from screaming mutant hybrids with claws for days, plus the pure strain gene stealers lurking in the shadows, and suddenly things get bloody very fast. And it's not just the grunts. The enemy commanders, they soon find themselves facing the Blood Coven, the cult's leadership team. This means that the Primus, a master tactician, a hype man rolled into one, the Magus, a psychic manipulator who could probably sell you a used car you already own. He's looming over them, the patriarch, a hulking monster that hitched a ride across the stars just to ruin this particular planet's day. But here's kind of like the catch, so to speak. The cult isn't the end game, right? They're like the appetizer. All their psychic energy, all their devotion is basically a dinner bell for something much bigger, and the great devourer itself. So when the doomsayers of the cult scream that the end of the world is coming, well, for once, they're actually telling the truth. Next up is the Death Guard. So the Death Guard are one of the Chaos Space Marine traitor legions, and they're basically Nurgle's favourite lads. Now, Nurgle, if you don't know, he is the god of chaos, death, disease, and despair, and his blessings, they turn these Marines, they turn them into like plague Marines, basically eternally rotting, stinking husks just crammed into armour that's falling apart just as much as they are. The catch is that they feel no pain. Stub your toe, they're not bothered. Flesh quite literally falling off their bones, still not bothered. It's just another Tuesday. They didn't start out this way though, so that is important to point out. So basically back in the Emperor's day, they were referred to as the Dusk Raiders, basically a tough as nails bunch, later renamed the Death Guard by their Primarch Mortarion. Now Mortarion grew up on like a hellhole planet, this world called Barbarous, where the atmosphere was quite literally poison, and the locals, they lived in fear of these like creepy overlords who breathed the gas, raised the dead, and then generally just made life miserable. Now Mortarion, he hated them. He raised lowly humans into an army, and then he kicked out most of the overlords, and he kicked their teeth in at the same time, except for his own foster dad. We'll call him foster dad, who lived so high up in the toxic cloud, basically that even Mortarion couldn't reach him. This is now time to like cue the Emperor showing up. Now Mortarion, he resented him straight away, because it's kind of like picture your dad swooping in to do the one thing that you always wanted to prove that you could do. Emperor was kind of just killing the vibe. So when Mortarion challenged foster dad, he nearly died choking on the toxic fog until the Emperor just casually walked in and killed foster dad, taking Mortarion's one big moment, and he never forgave him for that, and that is going to be really, really important later on within the lore here. Under Mortarion, the Death Guard, they were legendary, basically for resilience. These guys, they were always in the thick of fighting, the immovable like anvil of the Great Crusade. But when the Horus Heresy kicked off, Mortarion threw his lot in with Horus, still bitter about, well, daddy issues, I suppose. On their way to Terra, though, the Death Guard got stuck in the warp, and they were basically hammered by plague after plague until even their ridiculous toughness just couldn't hold out. Mortarion, fevered, dying, basically called out for help. And who should answer but good old grandfather Nurgle, okay? So when they came out the other side, they were changed forever. Armour was rusted, bodies bloated, flesh falling off and yet unable to die. They became the first true plague Marines. Instead of breaking into smaller like war bands, like many legions, the Death Guard, they stuck together under Mortarion, eventually settling on the plague planet inside the Eye of Terror, which he reshaped into a copy of the toxic barbarous. Now, since then, the Death Guard have been like Nurgle's plague-spreading delivery service. They march out of the Eye of Terror, spreading new diseases, basically across Imperial worlds, softening up defences, with mysterious plagues, basically before crashing in with overwhelming force. Now, to them, every plague is a gift, a cheerful little blessing from Nurgle to everyone else. It's just smell of doom rolling in. Next up, the Aeldari, or the Eldar as everyone used to call them. Basically, space elves, but crank up the volume somewhat. So ages ago, they had like the biggest, flashiest empire in the galaxy, like stretching, hi, can't talk today, can never talk, can I? Stretching across real space and the webway, with magic looking tech powered by their own psychic mojo. Every single Aeldari was born a potent psyker, and they strutted around basically like they owned the stars. It was a pretty big deal. Death wasn't even a problem back then, really, because basically when they died, their souls, they just floated into the warp to be reborn again. There was no muss, no fuss, no spooky like chaos nonsense, and it sounds pretty cushy. Right? The problem is they kind of got themselves they got too full of themselves, and then around 10,000 years ago, the Aeldari, they went all in. On hedonism. We're talking like galaxy-wide debauchery on a scale that would make even Slaanesh blush, which awkwardly enough is literally what happened. Basically, their excess birthed the chaos god Slaanesh, aka She Who Thirsts, who immediately just started basically gobbling up Aeldari souls like Pringles, right? You just can't stop. So Moorish. Once she popped, she couldn't stop. Once she popped, she couldn't stop. That worked. That disaster, the fall of the Aeldari, basically nuked their entire empire overnight. Now, the survivors, they then split into a bunch of subcultures, each with its own sort of like survival strategy. And this is what they sort of look like. You've got the craft world Aeldari, forgive my butcher of the pronunciation, Asuryani. They basically legged it from the old homeworlds on giant continent-sized like starships called craft worlds. Now, to avoid Slaanesh, they trap their souls in spirit stones, and they follow a rigid set of like lifestyle paths to stop themselves essentially falling back into old habits. Think of them as the monkish space elves. And Drukhari are your dark Eldar. Now, those lot, they hid in the webway, and now they live in the nightmare city of Komorog. Now, they kind of like keep off Slaanesh's hunger by torturing everyone else and then feeding on the psychic energy of suffering. All fun and games, right? Proper cheerful bunch. Then you've got Harlequins. These are like masked space clowns serving the laughing god, Kegorak. They guard the Black Library, not where you get like late fees. It's all where the Aeldari's chaos secrets live. Now they dance, they fight, they skip between factions, and somehow they're both terrifying and fabulous. Exodites. These are like the back to nature crowd. they bugged out before the fall and live on Maiden World in harmony with their planets. Now, when they die, their souls, they join up with the planet's world spirit. Think space elves playing farmer druid. Then you've got Inari. Now, these are like a kind of, I guess you could call them the new kids on the block. Now, they follow Ined, god of the dead, who they reckon will one day rise up, smash Slaanesh, that's hard to say, and restore the Aeldari to glory. Led by Yvraine, they're sort of a pan-Aeldari religious movement with members sort of drawn from all the other groups. I think I made that make sense, or I've made it even more confusing, I don't know. And then, of course, you've also got Corsairs and Outcasts. Now, these are like space pirate Aeldari who went, yeah, nah. Basically, they were like, nah, not for us. We're going to say no to basically all cultural rules, and they just basically just swan about raiding shipping lanes, essentially. So in short, the Aeldari, they used to be like top dogs. They kind of partied themselves into like near extinction, and now they spend every waking moment just trying to get their souls slurped up by their own chaos god creation. Makes total sense, right? Next up, we have Imperial Agents. Now, these are a bit of a weird one, so bear with me. I'm going to try and explain it in the best way I possibly can hopefully more clearly than I did Aeldari. But here we go. They are units that fight for the Imperium, but don't neatly slot into the big established armies, like the Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Imperial Knights, or even Adeptus Sororitas. Basically, over the years, Games Workshop has tried, I suppose, different ways to let you sneak these misfits into your force. Think Inquisitors, assassins, and the occasional weird like sidekick, I suppose. Lately, Games Workshop's gone wild with them. So now we've got like rogue traders, we've got navy breachers, we've got inquisitorial henchmen, and even more, right? So they finally slapped them all with a shared tag, which is the Imperial Agent keyword. And this bundled them into this one book. So what that means for you essentially is choice. You can sprinkle a few of these wacky units into your main army, or you can go full hobby mad scientist and run a pure Imperial Agents army, mixing in Inquisitors, like I mentioned, breachers, assassins, and then for the first time they've thrown in some pretty big names too. So you've got Deathwatch kill teams, Grey Knight Terminators, even squads of Battle Sisters. So if you fancy running an Inquisitor squad with squads of sisters alongside your guard, go on then. Knock yourself out. It's totally possible now. Like with any Warhammer Codex, it's going to kick off basically with pages of background. And there's loads of lore in this codex. You get a really good deep dive into the mysterious ranks of the Inquisition, complete with big 3 Ordos. So you've got Malleus, Xenus, and Hereticus. Plus the adventures of like I mentioned, rogue traders, and their sort of jaunts into the wider galaxy. Now I've read my fair share of Inquisition novels. I harp on about Eisenhorn enough, right? Even Vaults of Terror, you name it. But reading this part of the codex, it still had me hooked. I do think it kind of does nail the atmosphere of these units, and you can almost picture how they would feel on the tabletop, which is really bloody cool to read. And of course, there's the artwork, always the artwork, full page spreads of assassins, inquisitors, and other shadowy weirdos just looking dramatic. Okay, Salamanders. So the Salamanders are one of the loyalist first founding chapters of the Space Marines. Basically back in the day during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, they were the Imperium's 18th Legion. So before they hooked up with their, are they hooking up? They are now. Before they hooked up with their Primarch, they went by the name Dragon Warriors, right? It's pretty cool. Their home turf, also pretty cool. Nocturne, right? It's a volcanic hellhole of a death world that basically, it makes Mordor look like a holiday resort. That's how bad it is in terms of comparison. What sets the Salamanders apart is basically that they actually care about ordinary people, believe it or not. So unlike most Space Marine chapters that will treat civilians kind of like background noise, the Salamanders, they make protecting the Emperor's subjects kind of like a top priority. Now that attitude, it comes from their unusually close ties to the people of Nocturne. Now, unlike most Astartes, they don't just abandon their old lives. Many Salamanders still interact with their mortal families, even their neighbors, sort of long after becoming superhuman warriors. When they're not off fighting, it's not uncommon for them to live among the people in chapter bastions. Within Nocturnes, they've got 7 tribal sanctuary cities is what they're referred to. They're seen as community leaders, sort of as much as warriors. And the Salamanders and their people, they both follow the Promethean cult. Now, this is a fiery spin kind of on the Imperial cult. It shapes their outlook on life, war, and duty. Their Primarch Vulcan was one of the more legendary figures of the Great Crusade, and his story, the Promethean opus, has been told and retold across the Imperium. Whether every detail is true, it hardly matters, but Salamanders for 10,000 years, they have stood as kind of as paragons of strength and honor and resilience, and carrying Vulcan's legacy into the dark age of the 41st millennium. It's important to to know if we're talking about Vulcan and kind of like the lore of the Primarch. So when the Emperor came looking for his son, he actually disguised himself as a stranger, and then he challenged Vulcan during the Victory Festival. Now, after days of impossible contests, the final trial was to hunt one of the giant fire-loving reptiles, right, called Salamanders. Now, Vulcan slayed his beast, nearly died dragging it home, refusing to abandon his prize, even as lava was swallowed him. Then the stranger saved his life by sacrificing his own trophy to make this bridge across the lava. Now, back in the village, the elders, they declared Vulcan the winner, but Vulcan, he knelt instead, saying that a man who valued life over victory was worth following. The Emperor in that moment then revealed himself at last, and Vulcan then became Primarch of the 18th Legion, now renamed the Salamanders in honor of Nocturne and that whole trial and ordeal. It's a pretty cool kind of trick from the Emperor, I suppose. The Salamanders, they then quickly earned this reputation for strength and courage and master craftsmanship, but their greatest test, it came during the Horus Heresy. Now, at the drop site massacre of Istvan V. Now, this is where, alongside the Iron Hands and the Raven Guard, and I touched a bit about on the Raven Guard in my video last week, they were betrayed and slaughtered by the traitor legions. Now, the Salamanders, they were nearly wiped out, nearly becoming one of the infamous, what's referred to as shattered legions. Now, enough survived to carry on, but the numbers, they were too few to found immediate successor chapters after the war. Now, unlike many others, the Salamanders, they didn't fully embrace the Codex Astartes. Instead of 10 nice little neat companies, they stuck with just 7, each over strength. Though in most other ways, they follow Guilliman's rules. Their Primarch Vulcan, he led them for centuries after the heresy, before he mysteriously vanished on a mission that was never explained. It's really interesting if you want to read up on it more. Basically, before he disappeared, he left behind what's called the Tome of Fire, which is a sacred text, and it contains rules to 9 mighty artifacts that he himself forged, and these are called the Artifacts of Vulcan. Now, the chapter believes that once all 9 are recovered, Vulcan will return to lead them in the final war against humanity's enemies. It's really cool. Now, up next is Thousand Sons. Now, these are one of the traitor legions. They are sworn to Tzeentch, the chaos god of change, of scheming, of sorcery. So basically, if we touch on them a little bit, touch them. We're not touching them. Back in the day, they were the Imperium's 15th Legion. They were led by their Primarch, Magnus the Red, a literal giant, red-skinned cyclops with a brain the size of a small planet. The Legion was always packed with psychers, which made them powerful, but it also made them pretty suspicious in the eyes of the Imperium. Magnus was raised on Prospero, which is it's a world full of scholars, a world full of mystics. It's perfect, basically, for a Primarch who's obsessed with knowledge and psychic powers. So when the Emperor found him, Magnus just basically gladly took command of his legion, and for a while, everything kind of looked golden, but obviously there's always a catch, right? The catch was the Imperium didn't want sorcery. Basically, the council just banned it, straight up banned it, and was like, no, we're not having it, it's not happening. Magnus, being Magnus, ignored the rules, and he basically just kept dabbling in these forbidden warp bargains. Fast forward to the Horus Heresy, and Magnus gets this vision of the coming of civil war, and he realized in that moment that Horus was about to betray the Emperor. He tried to warn Dad, but the only way he could, and that was by basically blasting his mind straight into the Imperial Palace. A pretty cool moment if you ever get round to reading depth that is the Horus Heresy. But anyway, it was a noble intention, but it was a catastrophic result. His psychic intrusion, it wrecked the Emperor's secret webway project, and it left Terra kind of exposed to demonic invasion. It was absolutely chaos. So instead of like, thanks, Magnus, he got a big, like, basically you're grounded forever kind of attitude, understandably. Then the Emperor, he basically sent space wolves to drag Magnus back, but Horus, he twisted the order, and Russ and the wolves basically nuked Prospero. So the Shining Towers burned. It was depressing. The Thousand Suns, they were just massacred. And then in this final act of desperation, Magnus teleported himself and the remaining survivors into the warp. Which we know is just clutching at anything that they've got left. They reappeared on the planet of sorcerers inside the Eye of Terror. But then the Legion had another problem on their hands, and that came in the form of mutation. So their gene line was unstable, and chaos only made it worse. Marines, they were mutating into like monsters faster than you could say extra limbs for everyone. Then we mentor Ahriman, who is like Magnus's chief sorcerer. Now he tried his hardest, bless him, to fix it with the infamous Rubric of Ahriman, a massive spell that was meant to purify the Legion. Instead it turned every non-psyker into just piles of dust. And it's sealed inside their power armour, now called Rubricae. They're basically animated suits of armour with no will of their own, marching to the orders of sorcerers. Yeah. Magnus was devastated, so he resigned. And he's basically been brooding in his silver tower, just plotting revenge, while his sorcerers just lead the armies of Rubricae across the galaxy. So the Thousand Suns, they are now less, I suppose, a Space Marine Legion and more of an army of like dust-filled automatons led by scheming wizard lords, spreading the will of Tzeentch, one hex and fireball at a time. Yeah, all fun. Astra Militarum, or the Imperial Guard, I suppose, if you don't fancy the high Gothic today. They're basically humanity's World War I, like, doughboys in space. Just endless trenches of poor guys with las guns backed up by tanks the size of houses, and then, like, commissars acting as HR managers with bolt pistols. Does that work? I feel like that's a good summary. We're basically talking just billions of men and women raised into hundreds of thousands of regiments backed by columns of tanks, swarms of artillery, and enough boots on the ground to kind of bury enemy in sheer numbers. If a planet's local planetary defense force, the PDF, yeah, can't hold the line, the Guard is usually the first proper Imperial army to show up. They also garrison sort of vital worlds, holy sites, and key military like choke points. Tactically speaking, that they're not subtle. The Guard's whole thing is numbers, it's tanks, and it's artillery. So drown the enemy in bodies, shell them to dust, and then kind of roll over whatever's left with Leman Russ battle tanks. And that's why they're called the Hammer of the Emperor. They're blunt, they're brutal, they're devastating. I mean, compare that to Space Marines, who are more like the scalpel of the Emperor. They're more like precise, surgical, usually far too smug about it. There's no like universal uniform or single sort of like command style, I suppose, because each regiment, they come from its own like home world with its own traditions. But that said, there's like a lot of armies kind of copy the look of like the famous Cadian shock troopers. These were like considered the gold standard, right, of Guard infantry. The one thing that every regiment sort of has in common is a commissar. Now, these grim figures, they exist to keep morale high and heads low, sometimes literally, stamping out sort of cowardice, heresy, or treachery in the ranks with a bolt pistol to the back of the head, if necessary. So if we're looking at their origins, it actually goes all the way back to the Great Crusade, sort of in the 30th millennium. The Imperial Army, as it was then anyway, it sort of backed up the Space Marine legions. You first sort of handling garrisons and cleanup, and then eventually fighting alongside the Astartes as the Emperor's empires began to expand. But after the Horus heresy, when Horus sort of turned half the Imperium against itself, the High Lords, they got paranoid. They broke up the Imperial army, so basically nothing that big could rebel again. In terms of explaining them, I think that kind of doesn't really get more complicated than that. But like in terms of value for money, they're in there, so that's why we're talking about them, right? So then we've got World Eaters. Now these were once the 12th Legion of Space Marines, back when they were called Warhounds. These guys, they were already a bit unhinged, but under their Primarch Angron, they just basically went full Slayer album cover. Today they're kind of like frothing lunatics dedicated to Khorne, the chaos god of war and murder, and basically just turning every battlefield into the end scene of Evil Dead 2. That's Khorne in a nutshell. Angron's backstory, if you're interested and if you're still here, Christ, well done to you. But basically, imagine Gladiator, but with less Russell Crowe speeches and more brain implants. As a slave warrior on Nuceria, he had the butcher's nails literally jammed into his skull, implants that basically worked like a constant heavy metal riff in his head, just screaming, kill, 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 kill. He led a slave revolt, stood with his warrior brothers, ready to fight to the death. And then the Emperor did the sci-fi equivalent of unplugging your console mid-game, and he teleported Angron out at the last second, leaving his mates to die. And that was basically his Darth Vader no moment, and he never forgave it. His lore is really cool. When he then took command of the 12th Legion, Angron made his Marines get their own versions of the Butcher's Nails, and it turned them into these unstoppable berserkers. Basically think like Doomguy multiplied by 10,000. Problem was, once they started killing, they couldn't stop. Entire planets basically got red-weddinged because the World Eaters, they didn't have an off switch. The Emperor told Angron to knock it off. Like, what are you doing? But like every dad in the 80s trying to stop a teenager listening to, like I mentioned, Slayer, he bloody well didn't. So during the Horus Heresy, the World Eaters, they were front and centre in the bloodbath. They were the ones chain-axing their way through the Imperial Palace on Terra, basically like the Shining's Here's Johnny, but with 10,000 Jack Nicholsons. Angron, he eventually got promoted to Demon Prince, which is basically like Chaos saying, congratulations, Angron, you've just unlocked God mode. Then after the heresy, the Legion, it just tore itself apart in endless infighting. So now they're scattered into the warbands, roaming the galaxy, just basically the Mad Max warboys of 40k. Every battle is Fury Road with more chain axes and less chrome spray paint. These days, the World Eaters, they just don't care about territory or strategy. They're not playing 4D chess like Tzeentch's nerds. They just want skulls for the Skull Throne, for Khorne. So if you want subtlety, look elsewhere. If you want an army, basically, that's permanently stuck in blood for the blood god, like basically like someone just rage quit life and picked Berserker in Diablo 2, these are your boys. Like, all the way, all the time. Right, the moment has come. Now, maybe I'm biased because, well, I do play Blood Angels. Maybe I just needed to get them in there. Maybe they genuinely do deserve to be in the top 9 official, maybe 10 altogether. Maybe I saved the best till last. You'll just never know. But anyway, we're going to talk Blood Angels. So, the Blood Angels, right? They were the 9th Legion back in the day, before the big rebrand went and split the Space Marine Legions into chapters of like 1,000 each. So, out of all of the Emperor's boys, they're basically like the rock stars of the Adeptus Astartes. You can't tell me otherwise. They are noble, they are dramatic, they are angelic, and they're also cursed with some of the most heavy metal sounding flaws in all of 40k. The Red Thirst and the Black Rage. I'm trying to make this sound cool. They are the sons of Sanguinius, the angel-winged Primarch, tragic hero, and basically the Fabio of Warhammer. His death at the hands of Horus was like the ultimate Shakespearean tragedy. Kind of like, imagine Lord of the Rings, but Frodo just gets yeeted halfway through Mount Doom. Aragorn dies in slow motion, and Legolas develops like a blood addiction. That's the vibe we're talking about here. I hope that makes sense. The Blood Angels, they've been fighting with that baggage for 10,000 years. So basically every one of them is cursed to relive Sanguinius's death in their heads, like the world's worst director's cut that just never ends. Some can keep it together and stay noble. Now others fall into what I mentioned just now, the Black Rage. They go full berserker mode, and they end up in the infamous Death Company. Pain in the ass to paint, but it's tragic, but it's also why I love them. They are noble warriors. They know they're doomed. They fight anyway. I mean, it is proper like hero stuff, I suppose you could argue, basically on the tabletop. In my opinion anyway, they're kind of like Jedi meets Batman. They do aerial assaults like nothing else, just dropping from the skies in storm ravens and thunderhawks, then basically charging into close combat like a pack of caffeinated pro wrestlers. Other chapters, they might faff about with tactics, but my Blood Angels, no. No. They'd rather fly down from orbit, punch you in the face. That was the worst punch ever. Punch you in the face and look bloody cool doing it, if you paint them better than me anyway. And despite all of that tragedy, they've still got this like saintly, angelic look to them, which is hilarious when you realise that they basically recruit from the radiation-poisoned mutant tribes of Baal. They're these scrawny lads covered in sores who basically get transformed into chiseled gods through ritual blood magic. It's basically Captain America, if Cap also had to worry about randomly hulking out into a murder machine mid-battle, but less Hulk and more chiseled abs. They've taken a huge losses in recent history. They've come close to even extinction, in fact. But thanks to their successor chapters paying like a neophyte tithe and the arrival of the Primaris Marines during the Indomitus Crusade, the chapters essentially, well, they're back in the fight. They're still scarred. Obviously, they're still cursed. They're still the Emperor's most stylish, angelic murder machines. You can't argue with me on that one. So yeah, I'll say it proudly. The Blood Angels are the best. They are noble, they are tragic, they are deadly, they are ridiculously cool. Other chapters are solid, absolutely, of course they are, but only the Blood Angels can make drop-kicking a demon prince out of the sky while screaming your Primarch's name just look like a Renaissance painting. Fight me on that one. So, Christ, if you're still here or if you skip to the conclusion, basically the Combat Patrol is the hobby's classy set of training wheels, the kind that you would actually brag about. You would brag about them, not the ones your mum wouldn't let you take off. Yeah. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's kind of it's way less faff than trying to sort of reenact, like I mentioned, Robert Baratheon's banquet table on your dining room. And it lets you play before your back files for divorce. So if you're new, it is a perfect test drive. If you're returning, I guess it's also the perfect midlife crisis for you. Value-wise, the boxes I've mentioned, they are absolute belters. Some are, let's call them character building. If I've done the maths correct, you now shouldn't have to, so you can now spend that brain power instead on rehearsing more important things, like looking into the mirror and just keep practicing. No, babe, it's the last box. I promise. You believe me, right? As for factions, we've kind of toured the Nightmare-born demons. I'm so sorry, but we did it anyway. Sneaky Genestealer Cults, Plague Slap Happy, Death Guard, the glittery tragedy of the Aeldari, the cloak and dagger sort of chaos of the Imperial Agents, the chainaxe cardio of the World Eaters, and of course the endless sort of meat grinder of the Astra Militarum. Each one has definitely got a vibe. You just kind of need to pick your flavour. You need to roll some dice and just try not to summon anything that requires a priest with a pressure washer. Does that work? I don't know. And yes, Before the comments light up, I am blatantly biased. I do play Blood Angels. They are my favourite. They are also objectively the best, in the same way that pizza is objectively better than salad. They're noble, they are tragic, airborne poetry with jetpacks, the only sort of army, in my opinion, obviously, it's not like canon, the only army that's kind of like got that edge. They're a little bit gritty, but you know, they also look bloody beautiful. Anyway, if you have made it this far, you deserve a medal. But I really appreciate it because this video took me so long. So long. So anyone that's still here, I appreciate you so much. And I'm only going to implore you one time to please do all those things you need to do to support my tiny channel. And I hope to see you in the next video.